This summit is all about investing in African energies through an enabling environment and truly fostering growth, energy growth. To lead us in this next conversation, I am honored to welcome back to stage NJ Ayuk, Executive Chairman of the Africa Energy Chamber, who will be in conversation with a leader in the sector, Mr. NJ Inglis, Chairman and CEO of Kosmos Energy. Let's give them a very warm round of applause.
It is an honor to get to have this conversation with somebody that has been a true champion for Africa. NJ Inglis joined Kosmos about 10 years ago, but before that, he'd worked for BP and over 30 years in the oil and gas industry. But Andy's career has gone from Algeria, Egypt, Gulf of Mexico, Azerbaijan, Trinidad and Tobago, but also across the African continent. He is no spring chicken. Everybody in Africa knows Andy. And whether you go from the streets of Accra to the halls of power across Africa, he is known for his pragmatism. But beyond that, working a lot with Mauritania and Senegal, their leadership in those countries, to really get the intergovernment agreements to get the GTA project going. Under his leadership, we've seen a lot of developments through Kosmos Energy across the continent. The guy even figured out how to drill in Equatorial Guinea. So, Andy, you're welcome.
No, thank you.
And it's an honor to be here. Andy, I just want to start with these off-the-cuff questions. And I'm sorry you had to bring your friends to talk to us today, but we welcome them. When you make that decision in your boardroom, and I want you to take us through that journey to make an investment in an African country, and where to put the company's money or your money, how do you make that decision and what goes through your board and in order to make and choose, pick, and where to invest in Africa?
Yeah, the conversation, NJ, is fundamentally the conversation I'm having with my shareholders who provide the capital that we invest, and with our banks and bondholders who provide the debt that we also invest. But at its core, there's strong support for a just energy transition. It's at the core of Kosmos' strategy. You know, I'm pleased that we're here to talk about that today and enabling the finance to support that agenda. So at its core, it's about the clarity of strategy, a strategy that's supported by our shareholders and debt holders. And then ultimately, it's about how do you pick the best projects. And you know, our backers want to see projects in countries where there's stability of the fiscal regimes, where there's clarity of purpose. And the clarity of purpose is about a project that aligns with the country's agenda, that therefore is sustainable for the long term because it serves the purpose. It creates that economic development. And so purpose is important, and alignment of purpose creates mutuality. And finally, it's about regulation that's predictable. You can get things done. You talked about sign, but to sign, you have to have a process which is predictable. You put those three things together, and that's ultimately where the money's going to go. And within Africa, ultimately, the countries that are going to get differential support are ones where the money is welcome. So I think those are the three factors that influence decision-making, but ultimately, it's about a strategy where a just energy transition is being supported and being supported by our shareholders and debt holders.
What does a just energy transition mean for you and your shareholders?
A just energy transition ultimately is about addressing the issues that Africa faces today. You know, we talk about a deep gas resource in Africa. We'll debate that, I'm sure, over the next 3 days as to how you ensure that it's used, and how it's used for Africa for its energy needs. Yeah. You know, I find it quite curious that some of the Western leaders today are advocating for Africa to prioritize renewables. For me, I have a vision of the Western countries having gone up the up escalator of hydrocarbon resource development, got to the top, switched the escalator off, and said to Africa, now you come up the stairs. Yeah. Coming up the stairs is not going to address the 600 million who don't have power today, the 900 million that don't have access to clean cooking fuels. So how do you put that at the center of a just energy transition? And it is possible. It is possible to attract the finance. It is possible to come up with innovative development schemes that enable Africa to use its gas for its needs.
But I want to stick on this trend. You have green-light a lot of projects in Africa. Mm-hmm. But to the audience here, what is the biggest challenge you face when trying to get a project off the ground, trying to get a project started, be it a gas project or an oil project or heck, a renewable project?
You know, it's back to the point about the predictability of regulation. There are typically 4 constituencies involved. You know, there's the work with the NOCs, where you have to agree around the concept. You've got something that's economic, that's efficient, that's low cost, delivers the margin that all the parties needs. The second constituency is the Ministry of Energy, which is looking to ensure that it meets the regulations within the country and is fulfilling all of those requirements. The Ministry of the Environment also has a say in terms of the sustainability of the project. And then ultimately, the Ministry of Finance, you know, does it actually deliver the economic outcome? I think it's tough at times, NJ, to ensure that you create alignment amongst those parties. You have to work very hard to make sure that there is alignment. And I think the challenge that sometimes people don't understand is, if you're doing really well, you can get from discovery to FID, you know, 4 years, maybe 5 years. The typical political cycle is 4 or 5 years. And so the change of government within that cycle also causes, potentially, delay. Delay creates inefficiency, delay creates higher cost, and delay ultimately, therefore, creates poorer projects. And I think it's creating predictability around, you know, those 4 elements that ultimately is, you know, the toughest thing.
I had a conversation about, you know, maybe what governments need to do, how they approach things, but let's flip the coin a little bit. If you've been doing this for 30 years, that's like right before I was born. I'm good looking, right? I'm still young.
Before I had gray hair, NJ.
My wife does, so I don't know if she's lying. But let's talk to an IOC or an independent. What do they need to be doing when they approach an African regulator or an African government? How should they be approaching it? And you've had so much experience in this continent on dealing with various regulators, especially going in.
I think there are 2 things. I think the first is about commitment. Do what you say you're going to do. And I think it's so important that you set out, you put a plan of development in place, and then you do what you say you're going to do. And the world changes around you, but trust is earned by action. And I think, you know, my learning is that you have to be consistent, you have to do what you say you're going to do, and therefore you create trust. Trust creates alignment and enables things to get done.
Well, let me put you on the spot. Can you tell me a project that you've actually done that and it's worked?
Yeah, look, I would actually say that we were, at the very beginning, you know, when we started out as a company, our first discovery was actually Jubilee. We took Jubilee from first oil, from discovery to first oil in 40 months.
You mean discovery to first oil in
40 months? Right, you're right, and that's pretty quick.
Where is Tomal Window? Why don't we have first oil in Namibia?
Yeah. But so it works, right? And I think it was about clarity of what we wanted to do. There was a supportive environment, and the project, I think, has been incredibly successful as a result. Yeah.
But I still want to dig a little bit deep. How could you fast track and achieve that in 14 months? Because that's a record time.
Yeah, yeah. It's about a simple concept. Yeah, the FPSO was a conversion. The engineering of it, therefore, could be fast-tracked. It was using proven technology. We weren't trying to break new grounds. Was it absolutely perfect for the field? But it enabled the cash flow to come and therefore benefit Ghana earlier. So simple concept, supportive environment in terms of the government, and actually a supportive partnership in terms of the partners in the field. So you put all that together and you can get it done. But you know, again, a maxim for myself is keep it simple. It's easier to communicate to the governments, the NOCs, and actually easier to create alignments amongst partners.
How have you been able to bring NOCs along, align with them during this process, working with the NOCs?
Yeah, look, and I think that's my other big learning that I think is so important is this is something you have to focus on and you have to do it from day one. You know, I look at the GTA project. We drilled it in 2015. We actually drilled it 100% as Kosmos. The IOC that was with us decided not to put their money in.
I would not mention their name.
But we drilled it 100%. Then we spent a huge amount of time working with both NOCs, you know, Petrosen in Senegal, SMH in Mauritania. It was a cross-border LNG project. No one had ever done a cross-border project before. And we spent real time with each NOC at the very beginning. Every month we held a meeting. We went from Dakar to Nouakchott. Then we'd go to a neutral Paris to have the third meeting and cycle through. Now, the time that was spent on those face-to-face meetings created trust, it created alignment, it created understanding, and ultimately enabled us to put in place the intergovernment agreement which unitized cross-border and enabled the project to go. No one had ever done that before. And we wouldn't have...
Do you have time to sit with the Nigerian minister and NNPC and maybe sit with what do you call them? They're from my country. SNH from Cameroon,
yeah.
And EG, they go to those 18-day fields and EG LNG
Absolutely.
And cross-border gas, but they've not been able to. Would you sit with them?
They can just copy the agreement and they can, and they'll get it done. Well, funny enough is we used the agreement, the FRIG agreement, that was a cross-border, wasn't an LNG project, but it was a gas project in the UK, North Sea, and the Norwegian sector, and we actually copied and pasted it, yeah? So again, we kept it simple from the beginning. So I would urge those ministers to use what we used.
And you know, we're running out of time, but I want to just let you close with this last question. When you look at this continent, its investors, and the host communities, where do you see Africa's energy future? You're reflecting on so many years in investing, but also walking in the continent. Where do you see it going?
Look, the thing that I'm most excited about is the gas resource in Africa. Africa has the right to become a gas powerhouse, competing with an Australia, a Qatar, a US. It has the resources to do it. It can emulate the US by ensuring that that gas is being used domestically. The US has the lowest price, domestic price of gas of any continent, any country in the world. It underpins its economic growth. That's what Africa can do. And it will do it by ensuring it's used domestically. It creates affordable power. Ultimately, it addresses the 600 million that don't have access to power today. And that number's only going to get larger as Africa's population grows. So that's the agenda. We need to think big. We need to think beyond single countries and single developments. We need to think about the cross-border opportunities that we have. We need to think about the infrastructure that's required to ensure that it benefits Africa and it's not a fuel simply for export. You know, we're looking at projects today in Senegal where the anchor project is the domestic project. Yeah, there may be some LNG that supports it in terms of its economic efficiency, but ultimately it's about creating affordable power that creates energy security and allows access to power. It can be done. The resource is there, the rocks are there. It's up to us to enable the infrastructure to be built.
You just mentioned Senegal. Do you have an estimate on when that first gas would happen? Is it going to be first quarter next year or any time?
As I said on my results call yesterday, it's shortly.
Shortly.
No, but I'm excited. This has been
and you think Andy is not better than all these politicians when he tells you shortly, not a date. But Andy, it has been a privilege.
No, thank you, NJ. I've enjoyed it. And it's an incredible conference. And it's a conference that's talking about the right issues. And I think that through dialogue, you'll create progress. So thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to Kosmos for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.